Hi everyone, my name is Elizabeth and I will be taking you on the journey today, um, getting started with AWS CDK. So this is a voiceover over the actual recording because I had to take out the audio. There was an issue with the music for the first half, but I'll walk you through the things we did and all the steps that we took during the actual live stream. Last week we touched on the building and managing with AWS CLI. We had already configured the CLI during our initial setup, and we were able to continue from where we stopped managing with the console, and we tried to deploy at least a large part of our infrastructure using the AWS CLI. And now today we would be started with CDK. So everything we have done so far, yes, are things you should know when working with AWS. We're talking about the console, the CLI commands, and all that. But you wouldn't be using that extensively when deploying infrastructure the right way. That's why we need to learn some form of infrastructure as code tool, and we are starting with AWS CDK. So yes, the first thing would be to make sure we meet the prerequisites on this page, and that is the steps in getting started with AWS CDK. So we'll be back to this tutorial, but firstly we would go to check all the prerequisites are met in our environment before we get started. Here we have getting started with AWS CDK, and we'll be following the instructions here to set up our AWS CDK CLI. So this is not the same installation of AWS CLI. AWS CLI works fine. It's the CLI interaction with AWS API, but the CDK CLI is different. It uses some things you have configured in your AWS CLI, yes, but the commands in the AWS CDK, they are different from the AWS CLI. And underneath AWS CDK is synthesizing to AWS CloudFormation, which we will get to see down the line. But I just thought I should put that out there for you right now before we continue. So CDK stands for Cloud Development Kit, and it's, I would say, a programmatic method to deploying AWS infrastructure. There are different infrastructure as code tools that are available out there, some of which we may touch down the line, like Terraform. There's also Ansible, and originally CloudFormation with AWS. But when you see CloudFormation code, you also would admit that it's not something you want to be writing. Like, yeah. But yes, AWS CDK works well for programmers that are already familiar with the programming language. You see, there are options of programming languages that you can use. We would be going with TypeScript. Yeah, I think we went with TypeScript originally, but I have built this with JavaScript, with Python before. I haven't tried Java, C Sharp, or Go, but everything works. The only thing is, I think JavaScript is the original language that CDK is usually written in. So the other languages depend on new features being released in like JavaScript, and then they're now implemented in Python or Java or something like that. So yeah, and there are arguments in the community on maybe JavaScript is faster or not. I mean, these are all yeah, just peripherals. But we would be initializing our application with CDK. You know, everything setting up here is just following our tutorial. There are, I think, 12 steps in the tutorial, and we would be going through them. I don't think we were able to finish everything in one session, but we're starting, and we'll be setting up our CDK environment, you know, making the first installations and all the setup that we need for our CDK deployment. There's one thing I would like to tell you though. So far we have been able to deploy using the console, using the CLI, but none of them have been able to maintain or manage the state of the infrastructure that we have deployed. So after we set them up, we had to go and delete them manually, but with infrastructure as code, you wouldn't need to do that. You can just deploy everything at once, pull it down everything at once. So yeah, that's why it's important to improve, learn all the things that you need to get started and own your AWS infrastructure, own your AWS environment like you want to. So now we'll be starting with installing the CDK CLI in our environment. I'm trying to open my terminal. So here it is, and I will be resizing so that we can all read everything that I'm typing there. Or readjust and also just make it visible somewhere in the corner there. We can continue. So we can continue now that I have my terminal open. There is the instruction to install it. You can install it normally npm install AWS CDK, but if you want to install globally, you use the G option. And here you see the second command that has the x.y.c. It's about specifying the exact version you want. I don't see any need for us to be specifying versions here, so I'm going to go with the normal npm install. And I realized that I don't have Node set up in this environment. So this is a separate user, like a separate space on my computer. And honestly, I don't know what is and what is not there right now, but we would figure it out as we go. And I made sure I haven't tried all these things in this account, a fresh place not touched yet, so that we can explore, run into the issues together and fix it for someone that is running everything in a new environment. So I'm installing Node.js in my laptop. I set it up on my Mac and would be moving on after that. So it has finished installing and oh no, it has finished downloading and then I'll start installing. But while it's installing, I just want to tell you some things about infrastructure as code and CDK because it's, as you can read, it's recommended that you have a basic understanding of what AWS CDK is before we continue. So, infrastructure as code, starting from there, we talked about how we've deployed things using the console and via the AWS CLI commands, but we're not able to maintain or manage them using those same avenues. Like you go in the console, you can search each service, go there manually, click it or to delete to make a change and all that. But how sustainable is that when you have hundreds of resources deployed in AWS environments, as an engineer that is managing multiple accounts and environments? Imagine, just imagine how difficult it gets to maintain all of that. And that's what you are able to maintain in your version control system, your Git or wherever you want to store your changes in your code. You're able to maintain that using infrastructure as code. There are other ones, like I mentioned, Terraform. I'm very familiar with CDK. I'm also familiar with CloudFormation, but I'm not really a fan of it. I don't write CloudFormation, but I can read it and understand it. Yes. So CloudFormation is what you will be seeing behind the scenes. When we start, you will see it in AWS console. Whatever you do in CDK shows as CloudFormation in your AWS console environment. Now this has finished installing and I tried running the code again. I had permission issues. Yes. So I'm going to try running it with the sudo command. I just needed to make some changes in my environment. I think I will do that before our next session. But we'll go again and it should work. If you have your Node.js installed, you shouldn't be having permission issues like I am because this is a separate account. But npm install AWS CDK should work fine. Npm install -g AWS CDK should also work fine. As you can see, if you're also getting issues like I did with my permission, you should be able to run it with a sudo command and it should work for you. I already have the one package added, that's the AWS CDK that I installed, and when I run CDK version, I'm able to see the version that I have is 2.178.2, and then there's a build number beside it, but it doesn't matter. So to check your successful CDK installation, you should also run the CDK with the version flag there. And all going well, you should have the same results to showing the version that is installed in your environment. Now we can continue from where we stopped. So configuring our CDK CLI. Here we're talking about the authentication that it's going to be using. I expect that you already have your AWS CLI configured with the right authentication, but if you haven't, you can always go back to the first session that we had, AWS Cloud Part 1 week, that's week 1, and we talked about setting up our AWS environment properly. So you should have your default profile set up in your CLI, but if you don't, you can go to your console, get the access keys that you would use to set up your local environments. Maybe you can use the export, but of course on this page you'll see a lot of ways that you can set up your authentication. If you are using SSO, you would need to use your what do you call this thing, configure. You can configure your SSO and then you would log in and it would store your credentials for you to access. Or I mean, there are different ways you can set it up, but depending on what you are using, make sure that you have the correct credentials in your environment. You can verify it by running this command that I typed out, AWS STS get caller identity. So if you run it in your terminal, it would retrieve the identity, the credentials of whoever is currently authenticated to AWS in that environment. So check it, verify before you deploy anything, just so you make sure you're deploying in the right account. Yes, so this is all about credentials, making sure you have the right credentials in your environment, and then we'll proceed from there. I already have my own credentials configured here. I didn't change it from the beginning, so I have the same dev user configured in this environment, and I will be continuing with that user. Now I will be showing you how to check your AWS credentials that are available like in your environment generally, including all the profiles. So you navigate to your home location, that's CD, this wavy sign, I don't know what it's called, but you go to the .aws directory is in your root directory, and when you list the items in that directory, you will see two files, config and credentials. So .aws/config.aws/credentials, these are two files that are important for AWS authentication in your local environment, and you can check them to make sure everything is configured the way you want. Your config file, you can set your default things you want, your EU region, like everything you want to configure, basically you can set it. Your credentials is like all the credentials that you're authenticated with, including all the profiles that are there properly labeled. everywhere you see default is your default credentials. So even if you don't specify some kind of what am I call it, some kind of profile, it's going to pick whatever you have set in your default to authenticate with. So this is the page where you can learn more about configuring your AWS credentials in your local environment. I mean, you can check it out if you need like more detailed support on that. But I think you can have the very basic authentication set up with your environment variables. AWS secret key, AWS secret access key, and then you continue with that. If you need additional CDK tools, you can set them up, plugins for your integrated development environments like Visual Studio Code and any other support that you may need to install, but none of them are necessary for this project. Now we can get right back to our tutorial. So we'll be starting with creating our first project. Like I said, there are multiple steps that we would need to complete in this project. We have already checked our prerequisites are met. We have installed the CDK, CLI, and if you needed to install Node.js or get permissions, all of that is all sorted out, and we can proceed with creating our first CDK project. So I must iterate that till now we still have not bootstrapped our CDK environment. I just feel the need to remind you that because they are totally different things. So we need to create this project. This command is essentially creating a directory and also navigating into that directory that we created. That's what's happening here. But before we create this directory, I want to create my own directory. So I'm going back to my home location and I want to make my own, like I'm partitioning all the work I'm doing with this live stream session, so I'm putting it in a different directory. So I'm going to use the same mkdir command to make a directory, and I'm calling it ACP. So make directory ACP, and then I would use the same cd command to navigate into that directory. So cd ACP, and you see now I am in the ACP directory. So that's what this command is doing also. So we're going to run this one to make directory hello CDK and then cd into hello CDK. And now we are in the hello CDK directory. So here we're going to be initializing the CDK project. We are in the hello CDK directory and we're going to be initializing. If you named the hello CDK something else, you should take caution because you won't be able to follow closely with the tutorial. But I mean, just take note of the instruction here. Name it hello CDK and you'll be able to follow through smoothly with the tutorial. So this is the point where you get to decide which language you want to build your CDK app in. There is TypeScript, JavaScript, Python, Java, C#, Go. Yeah, I've only worked with 3 of them: TypeScript, JavaScript, Python. And I must say they are all very similar. The different constructs and classes and everything, they are named in the same way across the languages. So it just follows the naming convention in the different languages. It will be easy for you to, translate from one language to the other or implement the same thing in different languages. So if you want to use a different language, you can follow through with that from here. I am using TypeScript. So CDK init app, and then I'm using the TypeScript language parameter here, and we can run it. If you have Git installed in your environment, also it will initialize the project as a Git repository. So, your root location also is your Git repository, and you can just push or publish it to your environment. That's how it's going to be. So the CDK init command actually just scaffolds, like it creates the structure of files and folders in Hello CDK. So I have built CDK projects without using the CDK init command. I mean, not in that sense of like I've already created the files and all that before I now, you know, build a project and deploy it and all that. So you can decide how you want your project's file structure to be like, but this CDK init creates your files, the folders, and everything from scratch for you. And you are not going to be starting with naming each file, putting things here and there. You have something to start working with from the get go. So remember, we ran the CDK init app, and that app is actually one of the constructs in CDK. So the constructs are different kind of I would say entities in CDK that we can work with. You can say they are classes. It depends on how you want to define them, but constructs, like, they encapsulate one kind of thing, I would say, in the CDK environment. An app is a construct. So it's like the very, very basic entry into your environment that you need. So all your CDK applications are going to have an app entry point that is going to determine where it starts from. CDK is an IAC tool yet, but when you look at IAC tools, there are different kinds. There is the declarative, there's the imperative, and CDK is imperative. So you are defining how it's going to be created, how the infrastructure is going to be created, how the resources are going to be deployed. And one of those things is this app construct that shows where it's going to start from. Where am I going to start the deployment from? Where's the entry point into this infrastructure deployment? And yes, so I ran into issue again with my deployment, or rather my initialization, because I didn't use sudo. I need to use sudo for all my commands. You shouldn't have the same error if you don't have similar issues. So I'm going to just clear out everything I created in that directory and run it again with the sudo command, and everything should go fine. But back to what I was saying about this app constructs and all that. There are constructs in CDK, we'll get to see them, but there are different levels of construct that we would encounter. You should get familiar with them over time. And this app, I would say, it should be one of the very, very burst levels of constructs. I would say, yeah, because the more the level gets, the more complicated the resource that is deploying is. Like, I think level 3 is like a whole pattern of different resources and services already together. But yes, app is a construct, and it just shows where you're starting from in your application. So now we are going to be installing all over again using sudo, and everything should go fine. Everything will be deploying. I've mentioned that it resolves to CloudFormation behind the scene, yes. And we will be exploring our CDK code once the initialization of our application, our CDK app, is complete. And I'll be showing you some things. Here we can see, there's different kind of imports, there's different kind of declarations and all. Everything we would be exploring it. Everything will be exploring it. Now I want to go to my project in my IDE. I use Visual Studio Code. So from this directory, I can easily run code dot to open a Visual Studio window, Visual Studio Code window, exactly where I am in my terminal. If you don't have Visual Studio Code, this command is not going to work for you, but you can always open your editor, your IDE, and then open the projects. Open this directory, Hello CDK, and then we'll be exploring it together. But if you're using Visual Studio Code, from this directory, just run code dot. That's like here, and we'll be continuing together. So here I have my Visual Studio Code environments opening up. Yeah, I haven't used Visual Studio Code in this user account also, so there's a lot of things it's asking me to set up, which I am not interested in setting up. So I'm just going to skip it. Just ignore it and open what I want to do. Life is so much better that way. I'll be zooming in so that everyone can see what I will be talking about, what I'll be working with. Yes, I think this is much better. So you can see that we have all sorts of files, folders created in our Hello CDK directory. Now we'll be following these instructions to explore what we have in the folder. We're going to bin hello cdk.ts. And here you can see we are in the bin directory, opening the hello cdk.ts file. And as you can see, we are importing everything as CDK from the CDK library. It's a dependency for this project, of course. And this file actually defines the entry point into our application. So we can see that we are going to be deploying Hello CDK stack. Like it defines how you want things to be initialized or instantiated in your application. So you can have different stacks or different resources that you define here in the lib folder, and you decide not to deploy them in the bin folder, basically. So here in the lib, you are able to define your stacks, exactly how you want them to, your services you want to deploy. You define them here. Oh, I want to write S3 bucket. Oh, I want to deploy a database. Oh, I want to, everything, I'll be defining them in the lib folder. So there's a lot more things, of course, that you're going to be seeing as we continue down the line, but understanding the contents of your CDK file, your CDK folders, the directories is very important. So here you are looking at the Hello CDK stack. It's currently empty. We've not yet defined anything in this stack, but understand that a stack in CDK translates to a stack in CloudFormation. You can check it out. We'll be looking at it down the line. But when you say a stack here, it's going to be deploying a CloudFormation stack that includes all the resources that you specify in a stack. For the stack, they all follow the same kind of format. There's the scope, the ID is a string that you define, and then all the props that you want to pass into the constructor of your stack. But going through all the other files that we have, you can see the node modules directory, which is all the dependencies that you are installing for your the local versions of the dependencies that you are setting up. You have your tests for any test you want to write for your CDK application, the git ignore, npm ignore, the cdk.json, basically all the files you were going to be using that is necessary for your TypeScript project to work. Not all of them are peculiar to CDK. Some of them is just because we're using TypeScript that we have some of these files here. Maybe in Python we would be having requirements.txt instead of having package.json and stuff like that. So you may have different files depending on different programming languages, but the important thing is to know where your CDK stacks are defined, you know where your entry points to your application is, and you know where all your dependencies that you have configured for your particular language, where they are. These are commands here that you will run. They're all defined in your package.json. You can check it out. And we can proceed from here. The next step is configuring the AWS environment. We've touched on this before when I was talking about logging in with your AWS user or the authentication methods and all that. This is where it's very important, because when we bootstrap our CDK environment, it's going to be using the permissions of the user that is currently authenticated in that environment. So check it, make sure you have that already sorted out. Like I said, you can run this command AWS STS get caller identity to check which user is currently authenticated in your environment. And I will just be skipping this because we're not going to be going deep into setting up the configuration for your region and all that. But don't forget, if you are using a profile that is different from your AWS AWS CLI default profile, make sure you always add this profile and the name you named it there, and that would be all. To configure the environment for the CDK stack, we are going to be setting this. So you want this to be set up in your, no, I didn't want to make this full screen. Yeah, this is just perfect. Okay, so you want this to be edited in your bin hello CDK here. So let's take a moment to read this before we continue. It's just explaining kind of what we're doing here anyway, but you can read it before you continue. So here it's telling you if you don't specify the environment here, it's going to be able to be deployed in any environment that you are running it in. So it's going to basically take whatever setup that you have in your local environment whenever you're deploying it. That's not what we want here. You want your production grade deployment to specify exactly where you want them to be deployed. Your production staging, wherever it is, try to make sure you specify your environment here. Uncomment the next line to specialize the stack for the AWS account and region that are implied by the current CLI configuration. So what this one does is specifying the environment, but it takes the environment of your basically your AWS your AWS credentials in your environment variables. So at the point where you run this, whichever environment that you are in is going to take it and run with that. Or you could also try as sudo. I think this has a lot to do with the folder I went to go and create this thing in. I think it's best I move it. Yeah, I think it's best I move it. Should I just do that? Maybe I'll do that after today. I'll move it somewhere more convenient. But this next line is when you specify exactly which account you want. Can you see the difference? You can't have both of them. You can see they have the same key, env, but they are different. Here, this one takes the account details and the region at runtime. At the point where you run it, it takes whatever you're running it with. And this other one specifies exactly which account you want to run it to. There's a lot more complicated use why you would want to probably specify something like this. Maybe you deploy from a certain role and account, and you have already granted access to all your different account environments, and you just want to specify the particular account this thing is going to. But for us, I would say it's best for us to leave it with the process.m CDK default account of what we are going to be using. I mean, yeah. Or we can, for record purposes, specify the account environment here. I'm going to just comment this out so that in the future you can always see that this is an option for you also. Which I so I can't even save something, just imagine. So yes, this account, you have to update it. My region is always EU Central 1. Make sure you put whatever region you are working in. And my account is, let's go to console. Console. Aha, this is the account here. Let's go in there. So I know I have to remove all the hyphens. AWS does not use this. And yeah, this is what you want to have. Configure the environment in your application. We still have not bootstrapped our AWS environment yet. I want you to remember that. I keep reminding you because yes, it's important that we haven't bootstrapped it. Because when you bootstrap your CDK environment, it actually has resources that it deploys in your AWS environment to allow you to be able to deploy CDK stacks or I don't know applications in that environment. So yes, we are getting to the part of bootstrapping our AWS environment. So we're going to be running CDK Bootstrap in our terminal. It prepares the environment for CDK deployments. So there are some resources that is going to be deploying, like I mentioned. We can look at that. I think Bootstrap, this should be it. Yes. This is basically instructions on bootstrapping, but I want to show you the the resources that it creates during bootstrapping. So it creates some IAM roles that it's going to be using. And you find out that if you are using a user, you like whatever permission you have in your AWS CLI configured, if you are using a user that does not have the right permissions to be able to create all the things it's creating, it's going to throw you an error. Yes. So if you encounter some errors, maybe you want to check the permission of the user that is trying to bootstrap or trying to deploy something. I've run into issues with my mentor at some point, like 2 years ago when I was running something. He told me to help him deploy some things, and I ran into issues running my CDK deploy because I didn't have permission to deploy what CDK was trying to deploy, basically. So it's going to create these IAM roles during bootstrapping. This, CloudFormation execution role. I told you under the hood, it's running some CloudFormation things, but we're going to look at that. Deployment action role, file publishing role, image publishing role, lookup role. A lot of them, you may not use them from the beginning, but there are times like this image publishing role is trying to push images to ECR. That's Elastic Container Registry is an AWS service also. And basically you can look into all these things clearly, but it creates resources. This is the CDK qualifier. This is describing how the resource IDs are going to look like, so you can identify what each resource is that was created. We'll be able to see them, yes, but let's keep going. When bootstrapping an AWS environment, this is what I was talking about, permissions. So whatever IAM identity, your user, your role that you have in your environment, your terminal environment that is running CDK Bootstrap must have at least these permissions. All the permissions in CloudFormation, all the permissions in ECR, all the permissions in SSM, all the permissions in S3, all the permissions in IAM. So I have all of them for my user. When I created my user, I gave the user a power user role, which gives basically all permissions except for billing and IAM stuff. But I added on IAM full access to the user also. So it's power user with IAM full access that I have in my environment. Cross-check your user. We did that in the beginning where we granted permission to users, and you can add these permissions to them, like action on all resources. and attach it to the user. So these are ways to customize. I mean, we don't need to go through all of these stuff, but yes, this is what bootstrapping really creates in your environment. And now we can continue. It's not only the IAM users it creates, but you will continue. It's not only the IAM roles it creates. It creates S3 buckets. It creates the container registry repository that I mentioned. It creates some other things like that CDK would be using to deploy things in that environment down the line. So yes, we continue. AWS, no, this is not everywhere. Tutorial, yes. So we'll be running this CDK Bootstrap in our environment. Make sure you have the right credentials configured and we are good to go. So I will be running mine with sudo just to save us any headaches. But you don't have to. It's just CDK Bootstrap. And we should have this. Oh, which account? Okay. The environment, it still has the default setup here. I didn't save this, that's why. We try sudo. I didn't save this change. That's why. I believe. So, to run this again. While this is here, I want to go to our console and I'm going to go to CloudFormation. So this CloudFormation service is where we will be able to see all that we deploy with CDK. Everything should be showing here down the line. So yeah, I think okay, I didn't click this. So it's creating CloudFormation change. So essentially, this CDK is doing CloudFormation things. Yeah. So these are all the things that it created in the bootstrapping. It created this file publishing role, CDK bootstrap session. It created the staging buckets, image public. It just created a bunch of things that CDK needs. And if we check here, we should be seeing something going on here. Exactly. You can see this, right? You can see there's a stack that is being created in CloudFormation. If we check the CDK toolkit, we are able to search through all the things that it's trying to create in our environment. This is the stack info that is being deployed. This is description of the stack. It includes resources needed to deploy AWS CDK apps into this environment. Basically, originally, just CDK Bootstrap is already deploying things in AWS. It's already infrastructure as code happening here. We can check this as a sample of a stack that is going to be deployed in our environment when we work with things. So this is a stack named CDK's toolkit. This is the description of the stack. We have the status. It has created everything completely, the time of the creation. This drift status is to check that, okay, based on what we have defined in our infrastructure as code, is there a difference from what is currently in the AWS environment as it drifted? You're able to see that at a glance in your CloudFormation stack. So if you deploy something using CDK or CloudFormation and it's here, it's being monitored, I would say, because when there's significant change away from what you have defined it to be, it's going to be captured as drifted. Yes. And yeah, there's a lot of things you can check here. But these are the events that happened. How were these things created? How were these resources created in the AWS environment? You can see everything following the timestamp here all at once. So essentially you are able to write code, run it, and it starts deploying the things in the AWS environment without you having to come to the console to start clicking through things, without you having to run each command in the AWS CLI. I know we say, okay, with the AWS CLI commands, you can even have like a bash script where you write the commands you want to do and then you run it. But there's no way for that bash script, though it's automated to deploy things, it's not able to monitor what is in your AWS environment. It won't know the difference. Oh, what I deployed, has it changed? Has it drifted? What is the current state? You're not able to monitor that with CLI commands or anything like that. But with your stack here or your stack set, you are able to see what is going on. So here we have create in progress and what is going on with it when the creation was complete, all the way to where everything was completed. And you would see is the stack that will show completed at the very end, because it's the stack that starts the first and it's the one that's going to complete in the end. Here you can always see the resources that were created with this stack. All of them are here. All the roles, the repository, the buckets that were created. If I click them, it's going to open it. This is a, what do I call this thing? A parameter store secret or entry. It's not secret, it's basically parameter store. You can store parameters, store items here. So in the parameter store, it created the version of the CDK Bootstrap that we have here, and it's a data type of text, and we have it here. It's a type of string, and it's just basically entry of the version that we have right now. These are the tags on it, and that's how you are able to track things using infrastructure as code. This is what CDK would look like when you deploy something. Here is a role. Let's look at this file publishing role and see what is created. We can go straight to the role in IAM Identity Center. This is the role that was created, and we can see everything with the role. So essentially, we're able to create resources in AWS using CDK. This was created with the CDK Bootstrap. And now that everything is set up with our CDK toolkit, if we want to deploy something in CDK now, we run it, it's going to be using all these roles, all this repository, and all the buckets that it has here to run the deployment commands. That's what we have set up. Okay, and let's continue with this behind the scene. Yes, more things. Here you're able to deploy. Let me show you. You're able to set the outputs of what you're deploying. Like, okay, while I'm writing this code, I don't know what it's going to deploy in AWS, but I want to declare an output such that when you finish running, whatever the AWS resource number for this file asset key is, I want you to save it as an output on this. I want this bucket name to be saved here. I want the Bootstrap version to be saved here. Everything, basically, I want you to be saving it here. Yeah. Here, this is where we have the Bootstrap version, right? The value is 25, right? We were able to save it here as a value here with a key value that we want and with a description that we want. So we can see everything here at a glance instead of having to go through each of the different resources to find where they are at. We're able to declare the outputs we want on this stack, the parameters that the stack would need to take in to run. Everything is declared here. You can see now this is where it gets interesting. This is a template. right? This is a template, but this is not CDK. This is a CloudFormation template. Remember we were saying like, oh, everything CDK synthesizes a CloudFormation template underneath. Everything you deploy here, you can see the template. It's essentially CloudFormation in the end. So this is the CloudFormation template for what we deployed in CDK. I mean, our CDK Bootstrap. Basically, this is what the code is in CloudFormation. CloudFormation is AWS original IAC solution that they built, but it's not beautiful. I mean, don't quote me anywhere, but personally, I have never in my life tried to write infrastructure as code using CloudFormation. I have worked with it. I have contributed to a repo that was built using CloudFormation. Like, I can read it, I can understand it, I can debug and find where issues are, but I would not, for the life of me, start writing any infrastructure as code using CloudFormation today. No. But yes, that's what is underneath CDK. And these are change sets. We don't have any change sets here. So when a change set is basically you are trying to update this stack, and then your change sets that you deploy, it's basically set of changes, I would say. And yeah, just more things basically. You can look at it if you want. We're done exploring the CloudFormation stack that is deployed in our CDK Bootstrap, and we can now go ahead to just look at what we have next in our CDK tutorial. So we want to build our CDK application. I'm using TypeScript, yes. Don't forget, if you're using other languages, you can check them to see what you have here. With Python, we don't build, but with TypeScript, JavaScript, you have to build. Java, you need to build. C#, you need to build. Go, you need to build. So we're going to run the build. Here we have it here. This, I want to show you your package.json is essentially this that we're running, build. So we're going to go to our terminal and we're going to use npm run build. Okay, sorry, I remember. I must use sudo. You don't have to use sudo, but I must use sudo. I'm going to move all of this again next time. Sudo npm run build. It should work smoothly. So it has built our project. That's somebody. It has built our project. You can see before we had what? We had only one file. Now we have, not only we have, now we have the JavaScript, we have, yeah, it has built it, and we can see nothing, no errors, we didn't run into anything, it's all good. So, okay, this is just checking through some common CDK commands. I wish I could. There should be some way to show you all of it. I don't want to overwhelm from the beginning. Let me see. Okay, it should be okay. Yeah, they are here. I think these ones are okay for you to see here at a glance. You can look at them. Let me show you more. Yeah, here. CDK Bootstrap, we've done this. We're going to say CDK deploy, CDK destroy. Formally, when we did something in our AWS environment, we needed to go back manually to delete each of them one after the other. Imagine all these things we just deployed in CDK. You're able to just run CDK destroy, and every single thing that is linked to that stack is pulled down and destroyed. You are very sure that, oh, you won't be forgetting one server running somewhere that will be costing you money, or you won't have anything left behind when you run the single destroy command for a whole stack. This diff is to check the difference. Like, okay, what I want to deploy. Let me show you here. What I want to deploy and what is already there, like what I've edited. So you'll see the changes that are going to be made essentially. You can check them. There's CDK docs. The list is what we're going to check now. We've already run CDK init. CDK synth is like creating the change sets. Let me see here. CDK synth. Yes, it will synthesize the cloud assembly to CDK out, so everything that it wants to do. Yeah. Including a CloudFormation template for each stack. Yep. And yeah, let's just go back to our tutorial. We'll wrap up. Let's check our CDK list. We have only one stack, I know that, but we can always, it doesn't cost us anything to check it. CDK list. Sudo CDK list. Sudo CDK list. Hello CDK stack. If we have more stacks configured already, we would be able to see more things here. There are times you want to only apply changes to only one stack. You only want to deploy the stack on the, like you can specify the stack you want to deploy, the stack you want to see difference for. Like, yeah, this is all the stack we have right now. Essentially, it's just that. So from next week, we'll be continuing with actually working with our CDK application. We've been able to configure our CDK CLI, our Bootstrap environment is ready in our AWS account, and we are able to now deploy CDK stacks in the environment. So from next week, we would be working on step 6 to 12, all the things we want to deploy and set up in our AWS environment, and we'll deploy them, get them running, and go from there. But I think we've had a good start to our CDK project. I thank you for joining us tonight. I thank you from the bottom of my heart, actually, and I look forward to seeing you again next time. Thank you, and bye bye.